Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Jutiv. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. For the next hour, you and I are going to go through all those stories and check in with our correspondents and analysts as we break down the day's top stories. Let's begin with this new detail about the mass shooting at Florida State University. We will speak with a student who was there and tell you what we know about the suspect. Plus, the Supreme Court agrees to take up birthright citizenship, what a ruling could mean for a right that's currently enshrined in the United States Constitution. And a U.S. Senator meets with Kilmar Abrego Garcia in El Salvador, the latest on the fight between the Justice Department and a federal judge over the effort to bring the mistakenly deported man back to the U.S. This is CBS News 24/7. So we are learning new information this morning about the mass shooting at Florida State. Classes are canceled today as police work to find a motive. Authorities say the suspect is a 20-year-old FSU student named Phoenix Eichner, who opened fire at 11:50 a.m. His stepmother is a local sheriff's deputy. Students say they heard as many as 30 gunshots. The shooting killed 2 people and wounded 6 others. Those 2 who died were not students. Authorities declared the campus secure more than 3 hours later. CBS News reporter Katie Weiss is joining us now from Tallahassee, Florida, to tell us more about the victims. So Katie, what have you learned about those 2 victims?
Well, Vlad, I can begin with you this morning with some good news, actually. Of the 6 people who were injured here on campus at the student union behind me, all 6 of those folks are expected to be okay. And we're just learning at this hour that 2 of the people who were injured are expected to be released from the hospital today. So definitely a bright sliver of good news here in the midst of this awful tragedy in Tallahassee, Florida. We're also still working to learn more details, about the 2 people who were unfortunately killed in this tragic incident. We do know from police that those 2 people were not students, so still gathering some more details. Their names have not been released at this time. Vlad?
And what have we heard from the school, from the university president and others in the community?
Sure. So classes are going to be canceled throughout today and throughout the weekend into Monday. And the university has actually opened up a support center here on campus at the FSU Student Life Center to provide counseling and victims advocacy services for anyone who needs it. And actually right now, students are lining up to come grab some of the materials that they left behind in a rush during yesterday's chaos.
And Katie, what are you learning about the suspect? Apparently, according to Skylar Henry this morning on CBS Mornings, he indicated that he had another birth name. He changed his name to Phoenix. What are some of the students telling you? What have you learned about sort of his behavior leading up to this moment?
Yes, Vlad. Well, yesterday I spent several hours in the neighborhood that he grew up in throughout his middle and high school years. We know that his parents were involved in a pretty nasty custody battle. We're not sure what kind of role that may have played in his childhood. That is, however, maybe one reason why he did change his name as a child. We do know, though, that when I was actually in his neighborhood yesterday, that the home in that neighborhood, that's where he allegedly obtained the firearm from his stepmom to use allegedly in this attack here on campus. And I was able to actually speak with a neighbor who grew up with him in that neighborhood, who spent every day riding the bus with him. She gave me some insight on what he was like growing up. Take a listen.
He was very isolated. He was just very odd. I don't believe he had many friends. I tried to have a conversation with him one time, and it was only one conversation, but that I knew of. He was very quiet. He didn't really have much of a presence around.
Now, police say that he so far has not been cooperative with the investigation. We're told he is still in the hospital recovering after he was injured in a shootout with police here on campus during the attack yesterday late morning. But in the meantime, without many answers or information from that alleged suspect, still a very open investigation into the potential motive in this case. Vlad.
All right, Katie Weiss, thank you for your reporting, Katie. Appreciate it. Okay, for more on the legal side of the story, I want to bring in CBS News Senior Coordinating Producer for Crime and Public Safety, Anna Schechter. Good to see you.
Great to be with you.
All right, so you heard Katie saying that he's not being cooperative right now with the authorities, so at this point we don't have a motive.
That's right. He invoked his Fifth Amendment rights not to answer their questions. So that actually gave us a clue as to his health. We know he was shot by police. Before we had that presser yesterday where we learned he didn't answer questions, we didn't even know if he was able to communicate. So he was able to communicate there, but he also had enough information to know that he could refuse to answer those questions. But still, we are learning a lot. His birth mother had posted to social media over the years about her efforts to see her son. She posted disparaging remarks about his father. So we're learning that there was a custody battle going back to 2007. Also, she took him to Norway in 2016 when he was about 11 years old against the order. She didn't inform the father. He then filed court documents, and that changed the custody situation where he then was living more regularly with his father and stepmom. But police tell me this is really rough for them because he was one of their own. He grew up in the law enforcement community. So these very investigators probing this case knew him. He was active in the Student Advisory Council with the Sheriff's Office, and his stepmom was a beloved colleague of 18 years.
So it's interesting, Anna. On one hand, on CBS Mornings, we spoke with someone who survived not only this shooting at Florida State, but also who survived the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. So she never thought she would find herself in another mass shooting, but this is where we are in America in 2025. But I thought it was interesting that she's, my colleague Tony asked her about gun laws and what should be done by politicians. And there was a discussion that, well, no, this was perhaps a responsible gun owner because the stepmom is a sheriff's deputy. But to me, I still wonder, how does a kid get their hands on a weapon if you are a sheriff's deputy? Presumably, if you are a responsible gun owner, you would have that weapon under lock and key. But we haven't heard anything from the stepmom yet.
That's right. And it's such a great question. His work on the Student Advisory Council, part of that training is about safe storage, and yet he was able to obtain this handgun. This is a handgun that was issued to her by the sheriff's office. It was her weapon.
Service revolver.
Now that service revolver was then replaced with a new service revolver, and she purchased it, according to police, for her own use. So this was her personal handgun that he was able to access. Let's look at Florida state law. There are safe storage gun laws that apply only if a minor under the age of 16 is able to obtain a handgun or a shotgun from a home, like, for example, a parent's gun. But he was 20 years old, so it's unclear if his stepmom would be liable for anything. I haven't found any laws, and I've been looking all morning, that she violated because of the way federal gun laws are. They're relatively loose. Now, remember, after Parkland, the state did pass laws making it more difficult for young people to purchase handguns or long guns, but that didn't apply here. We don't know that he purchased a gun at all. He was able to obtain it from his stepmom.
Wow. All right. Anna Schechter reporting for us. Thank you, Anna. As always, appreciate you. All right. As I mentioned, FSU student Stephanie Horowitz witnessed the chaos from this attack. She's also a survivor of the Parkland shooting in 2018, where 17 people were killed. And Stephanie joined us on CBS Mornings, and she discussed those traumatic moments and the way that they've affected her mental health. Listen to this.
After surviving the Parkland school shooting at Stoneman Douglas back in 2018, I was a freshman. After that day, I kind of woke up every morning thinking that it could be my last day. I was afraid for my life, every step that I took. And I've come a long way over that time, and I've gotten to a place over these last couple of years where I didn't fear for my life anymore, and I was able to walk around campus and feel safe. And here we are yet again, and that was taken away from me for a second time.
Stephanie added she just wants to be there to support others in this difficult time. Coming up in just a few minutes, we will be joined by another FSU student who was in an extracurricular club with the suspect. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the Trump administration is ready to, quote, move on if progress is not made in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. Rubio was in Paris yesterday for talks in the war and discussed the White House's intentions if the situation is drawn out.
We need to determine very quickly now, and I'm talking about in a matter of days, whether or not this is doable over the next few weeks. If it is, we're in. If it's not, then we have other priorities to focus on as well. I think it's important to remind everybody that the Ukraine war is a terrible thing, but it's not our war. We didn't start it. The United States has been helping Ukraine over the last 3 years, and we want it to end.
I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand, who's at the White House for us this morning. So, Natalie, what progress would the White House like to see before they decide to abandon these talks with Ukraine?
Hi, Vlad. Good to be with you. Well, as you heard, the Secretary of State signal there, it seems that he, at least, is running out of patience for these negotiations, which have been going on for, he said, the past 87 days. So we know that he made those comments leaving France this morning, where negotiations with European counterparts have been underway, talking about a framework or outlines of a proposal. We know that talks will reconvene or are supposed to reconvene next week, according to our Margaret Brennan. But his comments also come in stark contrast to comments also made today by the vice president, who is visiting Italy, and said that interesting things have happened over the past 24 hours with respect to Russia and Ukraine negotiations, and that he is optimistic for an end to the war. But again, these comments from Secretary of State Rubio seem to put pressure on both sides to try to move closer to this deal. Again, he said they want some answers in a matter of days, not weeks or months. Vlad.
So Ukraine has said that it signed the outline of a minerals deal with the U.S. How could that impact these talks?
Yeah, well, we heard President Trump yesterday say that a minerals deal will be signed next week. Treasury Secretary Bessent also said that it's similar, substantially similar to what's been talked about for the past couple of months. What we know has been signed right now is, according to Ukrainian officials, a memorandum of understanding for an economic partnership and the establishment of an investment fund for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Details, we don't have exact details of what is in that memorandum or the source of revenue, but it appears that that is putting everyone a step closer to the signing of this larger minerals deal that, again, we've been talking about for weeks and weeks, subject to those contentious negotiations.
All right, Natalie Brand for us at the White House. Natalie, thank you. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen says he has met with Kilmar Abrego Garcia in El Salvador. Van Hollen pushed for the meeting after much speculation about Abrego Garcia's well-being. Senator says this case is much bigger than one man's story.
We need to make sure that the court system works and due process works, because if you take it away for any individual, it's a very short road to taking it away for every American.
Let us bring in CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarlane. Scott, first of all, how did this meeting happen? Because there was some reporting in days prior that Senator Van Hollen, was being denied access to Mr. Abrego Garcia, and then the meeting happened. What are you learning?
A two-day mission by Senator Van Hollen. On the first day of it, Wednesday, he says not only was he denied access to Abrego Garcia, he was denied a phone call to Abrego Garcia. The dam seems to have burst Thursday night with the permission and potentially the logistical setup of the Salvadoran government. They greenlit this thing, and those photos being released, you see the one there on your screen with Abrego Garcia not in jail garb, but with a Kansas City Chiefs cap on and plain clothes, maybe a political issue that Senator Van Hollen will have to speak to when he gets back from El Salvador late today here in Washington. The Trump administration, the Department of Justice officials have been posting that photo saying that Senator Van Hollen should instead be meeting with victims of crimes by undocumented immigrants versus with one. The senator will likely speak to that issue here. But you have this broader issue. What becomes of Mr. Abrego Garcia independent of this meeting? The president of El Salvador says he will remain in Salvadoran custody in that prison, and the lawsuits, the legal challenges about getting him back continue to mushroom, Vlad.
Yeah, I mean, that image was, I think we were all this morning, Scott, on CBS Mornings, during your reporting, we just sort of wondered of the image itself of Mr. Abrego Garcia in civilian clothing. He looked fairly healthy. Again, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know what the El Salvadoran government is hoping to, what kind of image they're hoping to project. So I'm looking forward to hearing more of Senator Van Hollen's report. But we also saw some images from the president of El Salvador, who asserts, as you say, that he's going to stay in custody. And then he's been tweeting what I sort of think are tasteless, or whatever they call them, putting out on X what I think are tasteless sort of assertions about this meeting. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, there seems to be some type of synchronicity between the Trump administration and the leadership in El Salvador. They're echoing each other's arguments. This is going to go to the court system. I mean, we had the appeals court for the Fourth Circuit, which is in Richmond, Virginia, but oversees Maryland and Maryland cases, with a scathing ruling Thursday saying this Trump argument about keeping this resident of the United States in prison in El Salvador turns law into lawlessness. That is the rhetoric of a judge that seems to be baiting the hook or triggering the next step, which is going to be another review by the U.S. Supreme Court. This one man's case. It's not only a national news story, it's a big case.
All right. Scott McFarland for us reporting from Washington. Scott, thank you. Sean Diddy Combs is due back in court today for a pretrial hearing. We're live at the courthouse next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. A cable car crash south of Naples, Italy, has killed at least 4 people. Officials say the car was carrying tourists through a popular mountainside near Sorrento on Thursday when the cable snapped. The car plummeted into a ravine. 1 person survived the fall but was airlifted to a hospital with severe injuries. The cause of the accident is under investigation. The lights are almost fully back on in Puerto Rico after the island-wide blackout. Officials say 99% of the power has been restored just in time for Easter celebrations. The outage was caused by a combination of problems with transmission lines in the southern part of the island. Sean Diddy Combs is expected to appear in a Manhattan courtroom this morning for a pretrial hearing. This comes ahead of the rapper's sex trafficking trial. It's slated to begin next month, though Combs' attorneys have asked the judge to delay it. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all federal counts. So let's bring in CBS News legal contributor and reporter Katrina Kaufman, who's outside the courthouse for us this morning. So, Katrina, walk us through what we can expect today and what the judge will lay out.
Good morning, Vlad. Sean Combs will be here at the federal courthouse today for what's called a pretrial conference. So this is a conference leading up to his trial, which is currently set to start on May 5th. But Combs' attorneys this week filed asking for a 2-month adjournment, Vlad. They say that they need more time to go through all of this evidence. Also, just on Monday, Combs pled not guilty to 2 additional charges in this case. Some of the other things that will come up today are there are 3 victims that the prosecution wants to testify anonymously under pseudonyms. Combs' team wants 2 of them to have their identities revealed. They say under the First Amendment that the public and the press should have the right to know who these women are. There's also a victim where the defense says that the government hasn't turned over hundreds of thousands of texts and emails that they say would be important evidence for them to review in this case. The government says that this is evidence that's not even in their possession, that they can't be asked for it, but the judge said that that will be discussed today. And lastly, there is a video, Vlad. This is security footage from a hotel that was obtained by CNN that appears to show an altercation between Combs and his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. His team wants that video excluded. So that will be another topic of today's conference.
All right, Katrina Kaufman downtown for us this morning. Katrina, thank you. Coming up, we'll hear from a Florida State University student who was on campus during the attack and says she knew the alleged school shooter from an extracurricular club. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a live look at some of the top stories we're following. Hamas has rejected Israel's latest ceasefire proposal. In a video statement, A senior Hamas official called instead for a, quote, comprehensive deal to end the war in Gaza. He claims the militant group is ready to negotiate an agreement to release all the remaining hostages in exchange for the release of all Palestinian prisoners. Israel's latest proposal offered a 45-day ceasefire for the release of 10 hostages. 59 are reportedly still in captivity. 24 are believed to be alive. Police in Belize say an American man hijacked a small plane with 16 others on board yesterday. Officials say the man stabbed 2 passengers and a pilot before he was fatally shot by another passenger. The incident lasted nearly 2 hours, with the plane circling in random directions before landing safely. Police say the hijacker may have entered Belize illegally. They are still investigating how he got a knife onto that flight. Luigi Mangione has been indicted on federal charges for the murder of United Healthcare CEO. He is now facing murder, firearm, and stalking charges. If convicted as charged, Mangione can face the death penalty. He previously pleaded not guilty to state charges filed both in New York and in Pennsylvania. All right, we're following the latest developments out of Tallahassee, Florida, where a mass shooting left 2 people dead and 6 others injured. It happened at Florida State University. Police say the suspect is a 20-year-old student at the school. He is the stepson of a sheriff's deputy who was able to get his hands on his stepmother's former service revolver. We're joined now by FSU student Reed Siebold, who was on campus when all this took place. Reed, before I ask you about what happened and your experience during this mass shooting, just how are you doing? How are you feeling? How does your family feel knowing that you survived another mass shooting in America?
I haven't really begun to process any of this. There's still so much adrenaline pumping through my body. And my family, they're relieved that I'm okay and I'm alive, and the same with my friends and my loved ones. But we're really at a loss, because this wasn't a failure of gun control. This was simply a failure.
Yeah. But I think you're right on about that, because as we've reported, the suspect allegedly got the weapon from his mother, who was a sheriff's deputy, a stepmother. Where were you when the shooting happened?
For sure. So I was in the Bellamy building, the College of Social Sciences. We were in the basement. We had our class canceled so we could work on a group project, but our group made the decision to go into the classroom to work. And so we were down there. 2 students ran in yelling about a shooting, and from there we very quickly locked down. We were locked down for about an hour, and we were hugging those next to us for some comfort. Didn't matter if we knew them or not. It was just the person next to you, and we were getting ready for the worst.
When getting ready for the worst, I can't imagine. I mean, can you take me through your state of mind and the state of mind of your fellow students at that moment when you realize that there is a mass shooting happening, and you have no idea where this individual is, the suspect, and where he is shooting people from? So it could be anywhere. I can't imagine sort of the mental gymnastics that one has to do to try to wrap your mind around the unknown like that.
Sure. So I everyday carry, and the only place I don't carry is on campus because it's a felony, and those who are lawful gun owners and those who carry legally don't either. So my initial feeling was of nakedness, if you will. I felt unsafe because I didn't have the agency to protect myself and those around me. And so what we instead of going to protection, we actually went into intelligence mode, because this is a class for the Florida State Intelligence Program. So we all went on an intelligence finding mission, essentially. We were trying to get any information possible from wherever we could. And we started to see a bunch of misinformation. At some point, my mother heard about 34 people being dead. And so that's kind of when it started to worry us, was when there was a bunch of different reports.
So you knew the suspect apparently from a political club at your former college. We've heard from some folks who grew up with him. I'm always apprehensive to suggest that somebody who commits a heinous act because they're introverted or because they're quiet or because they may seem strange to people would lead them to believe that someone could do such a thing. I was an introverted kid. I was quiet. I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, and I never once thought to do anything like this. So what can you tell us about who he was and what type of person he was?
For sure. So, like you said, I'm not going to speculate as to why he might have done it, but Phoenix had a history of espousing alt-right and white supremacist rhetoric. I remember hearing somewhere that at some point he said that Rosa Parks was in the wrong. He continued to do this, and when he was part of that club, to which I was president, it got to the point where we had to ask him to leave. And at some point after I had left, he had been allowed back, and according to the current president, he continued to espouse white supremacist rhetoric. Now, I'm not going to say whether that's why he would have shot up the school or not, but there was a history there. I don't think it had anything to do with him being quiet or off. We really don't know.
So Reed, you essentially kicked him out of the club. Can you just, besides suggesting to folks that Rosa Parks was in the wrong, what would have led you to remove him from this club?
For sure. So it got to the point really where he was making enough people uncomfortable to where it was either he shows up or a good number of people show up. And that's kind of when we had to make that decision. But he took it well, all things considered, nothing to raise a red flag. And from what I understand, he ended up at the Turning Point chapter on campus, seemed to have found friends there, I guess. But I haven't really kept up with him much since then. I've seen him a couple times in passing, but he, seemed fairly normal.
And in your club, there were no writing submissions, or in other words, there's nothing on paper of him espousing some of those views when he was part of this club?
No, this is just a roundtable talk group about, current events of the day. We didn't really keep minutes or anything. We just, it was supposed to be a respectful conversation among peers. And when he went beyond that, that's when we had to do that.
Wow. All right. Some really fascinating insight there from Reed Siebold, a student at Florida State University who knew the suspected shooter. Reed, thanks for your time. I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you and your classmates are okay. And stay safe out there.
Thank you, Vlad.
All right. The United States Supreme Court has decided to take up President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship for some people living in the U.S. A hearing is scheduled for next month. The president says he's looking forward to the issue being litigated.
I am so happy. I think the case has been so misunderstood. That case, birthright citizenship, is about slavery. That's not about tourists coming in and touching a piece of sand and all of a sudden they're a citizenship. They're a citizen. That is all about slavery.
Let's bring in CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford. Jan, good to see you. It's sort of a simplistic notion, just because that amendment was passed in the wake of emancipation, that it is simply about slavery. Can you explain exactly what the judges and the justices will be looking at?
Well, okay, so let me just give you a little background first. I mean, this all started, of course, when Trump issued that executive order on day one that essentially would nullify this concept of birthright citizenship, which we have long thought, and certainly the courts have thought, that if you're born here, then you're a citizen of this country. And in fact, there's an 1898 Supreme Court case that suggests that is very much how you should read the 14th Amendment. Now, Trump is arguing, like you said, it's not 1898. This is not about slavery. This is a new day. And so if you are born to parents who are here illegally, that you are not a U.S. citizen. That's his position. Vlad, he has lost that argument at every single turn in the lower courts, every one, blatantly unconstitutional. And what they've done, these judges have issued nationwide injunctions that one judge that affects the entire country that bans, Trump's arguments on birthright citizenship. That actually is the narrow legal issue that the justices are going to take up. They're not going to confront the whole bigger point of birthright citizenship, not yet anyway.
So, Jan, as somebody who covers the courts for CBS News, just explain then if he is losing at every level of the judiciary, how often does the Supreme Court go against the precedent set by other courts?
Very rarely, and that's why they're not taking up this issue of birthright citizenship, because there's no conflict in the lower courts. All the lower courts are in agreement that Trump is wrong. What they're doing instead is taking a look at something that is an increasing problem. And again, that's the issue of injunctions. I know it sounds like, boring to talk about, but essentially Republican and Democratic administrations have long opposed this idea that one federal judge can set policy for the entire country. And so, that was one of the last legal briefs, for example, the Biden administration filed, urging the court to take a look at these nationwide injunctions. So that is what the court is going to look at. The Trump administration didn't ask the Supreme Court to consider the underlying issue of birthright citizenship. They asked the court to look at this issue of nationwide injunctions. It just happens to be in this birthright citizenship case. Now, that's not to say that the issue of birthright citizenship may come up down the road. But if Trump wins this case on the issue of injunctions, that doesn't mean he's going to win on birthright citizenship, Vlad.
An important distinction, as always, from our Jan Crawford. Thank you, Jan, for your brilliant analysis. We appreciate it, as always.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right. The United Nations nuclear watchdog says that nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran are, quote, at a very crucial stage. The next round of meetings are set to take place tomorrow in Rome. They come as the U.S. launched what appears to be the deadliest strike on Yemen's Houthi rebels under President Trump. The blast at an oil port killed at least 58 and left more than 100 wounded. The Trump administration has linked its airstrikes in Yemen to its effort to pressure Iran over its nuclear program. I want to bring in Osama Khalil. He is the chair of the International Relations Program at Syracuse University. Okay, sir, we're seeing more intense attacks from the Department of Defense on Yemen. Is this pressure tactic at all working, or is it making things worse?
No, I would argue it's making things much worse, and this is really unnecessary. We see a failed policy under the Biden administration of attempting to separate the situation in Yemen and the Ansar Allah movement, the Houthi movement in Yemen, from Israel's war in Gaza. Ansar Allah has made it clear that these two are connected, and the Biden administration refused to accept that and launched these airstrikes, the beginning of the airstrikes. The Trump administration, unfortunately, has continued them, and rather than seeking a diplomatic off-ramp. And what we've seen, quite frankly, is that the United States has spent billions of dollars bombing Yemen, one of the poorest countries on earth, in a very failed effort to dissuade the Ansar Allah movement from supporting Palestinians in Gaza. All of this could have been ended at least a year and a half ago, and the fact that it's continuing under the Trump administration is another yet failed policy here, attempting to use airstrikes when diplomacy could work. Now, the Trump administration is claiming this is an attempt to pressure Iran, but it's unclear to me, quite frankly, why bombing a port, killing paramedics and port workers is somehow going to pressure Iran in negotiations. If the United States wants to negotiate with Iran, it should negotiate with Iran. There's no reason to be bombing Yemen to do that.
President Trump has made overtures and suggested that he is looking for some kind of diplomatic or diplomacy with Iran. Talk to me about that effort and how Israel views those efforts.
Well, according to reports, Israel's been trying to convince the Trump administration to launch attacks on Iran. So yet again, another expanded war in the region. So this would build on, we have a war in Gaza in which the United States is supporting Israel directly and through arming and funding. We have the United States now bombing Yemen in support of that war. And of course, Israel attempting to talk to the United States into bombing Iran. Now, according to press reports that were leaked, it appears that President Trump rejected those overtures and instead is at the moment committed to diplomacy. And I think, to be clear, considering what this means, it's not just that the United States and Israel can bomb Iran and it'll be over in 15 minutes. We've been sold that line multiple times. We were sold it in Yemen, for example. So if you just take a look at Yemen and let's see what's happened for the past 18 or 19 months, the United States has spent billions of dollars bombing Yemen with no discernible impact. Now, if you were to try and start bombing Iran, and considering what the Ansar Allah movement has done in terms of diverting shipping from the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, some 80% of shipping has been diverted out of the Red Sea. If you take that exponentially with Iran, should the United States and Israel begin bombing Iran, what that would mean to the global economy, what that would mean to shipping coming out of the Persian Gulf, in particular oil supplies, will be dramatic. This is on top of everything that's happened the past few weeks to the global economy following the Trump tariffs. So this is another ill-advised and ill-fated military campaign in which American public is being sold on the potential for airstrikes that won't be successful. Now, in terms of the diplomacy, there's a real effort, there's a real attempt here, and there's a real possibility to finally resolve this issue with Iran. Now, President Trump is unlikely to admit he made a mistake in canceling the joint comprehensive agreement that they had with Iran's nuclear program. He won't admit the mistake. What he can do is now actually complete that agreement in a way that we can actually reduce tensions in the region and globally. Now, hopefully they will do that, and we're seeing some flexibility on the Iranian side, but at the same time, they want a commitment from the United States that this agreement won't be torn up by the next administration or by the Trump administration itself.
Fascinating insight there, Mr. Osama Khalil. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Up next, we're live in Rome for a look at Pope Francis' Easter plans as he continues his recovery from double pneumonia this Good Friday. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The new U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, visited the Western Wall in Jerusalem today. It's the holiest Jewish prayer site in the Old City. Huckabee inserted a prayer between the stones, as is customary for visitors. He says it was a prayer for peace that was handwritten by President Trump. Huckabee also called for the release of all the remaining hostages in Gaza. Meanwhile, in Rome, Christians are celebrating Good Friday today and all around the world. Typically, the Pope would preside over a service, but this year he's delegated responsibilities as he continues his recovery from double pneumonia. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay is joining us now from Rome to talk about this. So, Chris, we did see the Pope yesterday. It was a surprise to a lot of people. What more can you tell us about that? And is there a chance we'll see him at any other events over the Easter weekend?
Hey, Vlad. Well, yeah, it was actually part of a string of surprise appearances he's been making over the past 10 days or so. So the most recent one was yesterday, Holy Thursday. He pops out of the Vatican and shows up at a prison and is mixing and mingling with about 70 prisoners there. On Palm Sunday, 6 days ago, it was here in St. Peter's Square where Pope Francis showed up. Again, not scheduled to be here, mixing and mingling with 20,000 people. And remember, this is a man who was ordered by doctors to stay at home and rest and avoid mingling with the public for at least 2 months when he was discharged from the hospital just about 3 weeks ago. So he's quite obviously defying doctors' orders here. You might be able to hear the helicopters flying over me. I feel like I should point this out because to add another twist to this story, we've got J.D. Vance, who is arrived in Rome today for Easter weekend. He is, of course, Catholic, and there's been a lot of security helicopters flying over us. So to your question as to whether or not we might see Pope Francis, we might see him on Easter Sunday. That's a big event, one that many say is too big for him to miss. And then, of course, J.D. Vance is in town. There's nothing on the books for the two of them to meet, but who knows?
Yeah, for sure. So we don't know if Vance is scheduling an appointment with the pontiff, do we, Chris?
Well, there's nothing on the books, but who knows? He is, of course, here in the exact same place as Pope Francis over Easter weekend. In fact, today, J.D. Vance is scheduled to appear here at the Vatican in a chapel for a prayer service on Good Friday. And, he's here all the way through Easter. There's nothing on the books, but indeed they could meet. This is a weekend. This is a week of surprises, as we've seen with Pope Francis. Pope Francis isn't supposed to be making any public appearances right now, but he's the Pope. He gets to do whatever he wants.
That is for sure, especially this weekend, Chris. Thank you very much, my friend. Good to see you.
Indeed. Thanks, Vlad.
All right, coming up, a look at your weekend forecast. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
I think that Delaware's got so many incredible stories to tell. Every town's going to have its own story. Every person's going to have their own relationship with this river.
We are going to spend 5 days along the Delaware River, all the way up from the Catskill Mountains and into Philadelphia and all the way out to the ocean. And we're going to tell the stories of the people that are looking at these problems and trying really hard to fix them.
A little preview there from CBS News national environmental correspondent David Schechter's upcoming CBS documentary, An American River. Earlier on CBS Mornings, David spoke about why he wanted to do this deep dive into the state of America's waterways.
I think it starts with the idea that rivers have defined our sense of place in this country. And so you mentioned everybody lives within a mile of, most people live within a mile of a river. Every community is sort of defined by the rivers, developed along the river. 60% of the water that we get to drink comes from rivers, lakes, and streams. They're critical for our existence, not just for recreation. And they are central to our connection to the environment. And we have fouled up our rivers in many ways through pollution, through overdevelopment, by building too close to rivers, putting communities and people at risk from floods and the risks that come with floods.
The CBS News documentary, An American River, can be streamed right here on CBS News 24/7 tomorrow, April 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern, or you can watch it on the CBS News channel on YouTube. A hailstorm pummeled Omaha, Nebraska overnight, smashing cars and shattering windows, and there's another round of severe storms threatening to hit the area again this weekend. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a look at the national forecast. Hi, Grant.
Hey, Vlad, look, we knew going into yesterday that there were going to be some large hailstones, but when you start getting reports of hailstones, 2, 3, and in some cases in Iowa, we had hailstone reports of 4 inches in diameter. You're talking about baseball to softball size hailstones rapidly falling down from the sky. That's going to cause some damage, and that's what we could see again later today. But from Iowa to Nebraska, several reports of anywhere between 2 3/4 to 4 inch diameter hail. Now, look, this is the area of concern today. A little farther south into Texas and Oklahoma, we have that significant risk of large hail, 2 to 3 inches in diameter. We very well could see another day with some hailstones upwards of nearly 4 inches in diameter. Now, the severe risk today is going to extend from Texas all the way through the mid-Mississippi Valley up into the Great Lakes states as the storm system sort of regenerates. This is a secondary storm system from the one that developed yesterday. This one dives south. You got snow on the backside of it. This storm system will move to the east. Now, we could see some damaging winds and some tornadoes as we go through the next couple of days. But then tomorrow, we'll see another day with a severe threat from Texas up into Arkansas and southern Missouri as that storm system starts to move to the east. Now, not as great of a risk as we go into Easter itself, but we'll still have to watch out for that potential for some damaging winds, some large hail, and maybe even the possibility of some tornadoes. Now, in addition to all of that, there's also going to be the threat for some flash flooding across the central United States. We'll have to watch that because as we go into the holiday weekend, a lot of people start tuning out the weather. We got to make sure that we stay weather aware across the central United States as we go through the next couple of days. Otherwise, across the country, starting off your weekend looking really nice, warm and sunny across the southeast, 85 degrees in Atlanta this afternoon. Again, watching for that severe weather across the central plains. As we go back into the west, you've got winter, old man winter, just continuing to be an issue. You've got snow falling, still looking at some places picking up a half foot of snow, maybe even more than that. West Coast overall looking pretty nice. Temperatures in Northern California in the low 80s. You get down to L.A., partly cloudy skies today. Temperatures right around 63 degrees. But Vlad, I will tell you what, man, can you imagine 3 to 4 inch diameter hail? A significant concern, obviously, from the video you saw. That's going to cause some damage.
I can't imagine it. That's why I live in New York City. Grant, good to see you, my friend.
Smart man.
Have a nice weekend, man. That does it for me, folks. Stay right where you are. After the break, Mugo D-Way is live from San Francisco with all the breaking news from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.